Welcome to Amplify. I'm your host, Candice Dormon. On this show, we shine a light on people making moves, grinding, hustling, and being excellent because it's 2020 and there are still a lot of first and onlys across almost every industry. So let's dig in. Our guest grew up in the UK and moved to the United States as a nanny in her early 20s. She went back to school to obtain an associate's degree in early childhood education and opened a family home daycare when her daughter was a year old. She's run a successful daycare business for 9 years, providing high-quality care that keeps her clients coming back and referrals high. Recently, due to COVID-19, she has closed her business and like many, she's figuring out what's next. Josie, welcome to Amplify.
Hi.
Hi, Josie. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, Candice?
I'm good. I'm so glad to have you here on the show. Welcome to Amplify.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit. I have really enjoyed getting to know you over the last few years as we're both childcare providers. And I remember hearing about you in town, right? Like, it's a small town that we live in, even though it's technically a city, but it's a small town. And so when there are good people around, people are always talking about them. So I remember when I was looking for childcare before I opened my program, people said, "Oh, you have to check with Josie. Josie is so great, but you might have to get on the wait list." And so I don't think I ever got to meet you at that time. But then once I started my business, I thought I should probably go talk to Josie because she knows the lay of the land and she knows what's going on in this town. And that's how we eventually met. So that was a couple of years ago, and I'm really glad to know you.
I'm glad to know you too, Candice.
So today we're talking about childcare in the time of a pandemic. Right? We're in the middle of COVID-19 and We're in the middle of COVID-19, and while some childcare centers and family home providers have been able to remain open as an essential service over the last several months, a lot of businesses have closed. And there was just mentioned, I saw a number like 45,000 seats, childcare seats, have been lost in the last couple of months, which is on top of the already too few seats that we had before that. So I am just thinking a lot, especially as someone who also closed their program, a lot about what it would take to open up again, right? Again, some people have remained open and have been able to manage with the increased requirements and increased safety requirements. But for one reason or the other, I was afraid to do that given my family situation. So I really wanted to talk with you about what this means for us. Do we think that we can get back to childcare? Will we ever get back to normal? Just like kind of thinking through this, and because I think a lot of other providers are also having the same wondering thoughts, whether they are open fully and managing, or reduced, or closed, right? So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you did? Our state, the state of Connecticut, closed down on March 13th. What has it been like for you since then?
I stayed open. Two of my families immediately left. I had only three families enrolled at the time. So two of my families immediately left, and one stayed. It's actually the child of an essential worker.
So you went from 3 to 1 immediately?
3 to 1 immediately. And that continued for about, I think probably I stayed open for 2 months, 2.5 months. I couldn't afford to close, but then it got to the point where I couldn't afford to stay open, not with one family, one income coming in. So I had to close about, I think it's 3 weeks ago now. And the directives we were getting from the state meant there were more protocols, cleaning, extra cleaning, coming out in the morning to greet the parents at the car rather than having them come into the house, wearing protective gear and taking the child's temperature. And I know I've heard from other families that seems like a traumatic way to start the day. I understand that it is, but it's, once we got into the groove of doing that every day, it was fine. And I think I felt more comfortable once I closed, because knowing that we have a very small house and it's hard to socially distance in any kind of manner in our house if other people are coming in. So I was relieved, but at the same time, it was, it's a business that we built up over the years, and it's hard when you have to take a step back from it.
Absolutely. And so right now, are you closed for good, or are you closed for the time being?
Gosh, I'm hoping that I'm closed for the time being. Who knows what's going to happen? There's so many mixed messages coming in from all areas, even with the opening of schools in the fall. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think we have to keep our minds open and know that it could change it any day. So
yeah. So the guidance just came out in our state that schools are opening up like normal as of September, right? Full day every day.
Which
I know that there was talk about a B schedule, some kind of like delayed schedule, or on and off schedule for students. And it sounds now like, it feels like Connecticut is a little bit too confident in their decreasing numbers. And it's just like, oh, we've got it under control, as if we have some kind of bubble wrapped around Connecticut.
Exactly. And yet we're seeing all these increase in cases in other states. And there's no telling what's going to happen from one week to the next, because people are relaxing their restaurants are opening and people are starting to be together again, and who knows what's going to happen. So I did think the directive for the schools in the fall was a little open-ended, though, because it said depending on
the numbers.
The numbers. So.
Right, and so that's to your point that you said earlier, that we have this plan now, but of course things could change on a dime, and that's exactly what I'm trying to wrap my head around as a provider, as a business owner. You know that there's always room for like anything that can happen, right? But this is a special situation.
Yeah, because nobody knows. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Nobody knows what's going to happen. So I think we're all just waiting to see, and there's nothing more we can do.
Nothing more we can do. Yeah. And then on top of all of that, as childcare providers, we operate in a certain way, given the nature of everyone else's schedule around us, right? The nature of school schedules, of work schedules, all of those things have an effect on childcare, whether we like it or not, right?
Yes.
We can't ignore that. And so even if you made arrangements now, if the school system changed come September, you would have to make new arrangements, right? Because it's potentially that the older siblings of your current clients need somewhere to go, and they might be looking at you to take care of older kids. Did you have to adjust in the time with any older kids in your program while you were open for those few weeks?
I didn't. As I said, the two families left immediately. They had older siblings, and they were coming out of school, and the parents were able to stay home, which was really good for them.
So then it was just your older child.
Yes, my older child. Yeah.
And how was distance learning for you?
Oh, it was fun. It was, it was fine, and my daughter's school did a really amazing job at. They had 2 weeks of spring break from March 16th. They went on to 2 weeks of spring break, so the teachers had 2 weeks to start thinking about what that meant, and to prepare a little bit more. I think they had more preparation than maybe other schools did. So they really hit the ground running with it.
That's good.
Yeah.
So if we can switch gears from what happened to what we think could happen, right? We had a crystal ball, or we had a magic genie, right? We can't get rid of Corona, but we could make the situation a little more conducive to us being able to comfortably operate. What kind of conditions would you like to have in place for you to feel comfortable to open up your program?
Well, best case scenario, I would have more space. We have a small house, and it's hard to contain. I don't know if that's the right word because we're talking about children.
Right.
but I really need to be able to control the area where other people are coming into the house. So during those few months that I stayed open, I only used the living room, the kitchen, the bathroom, and the guest room. Usually the kids would sleep in my bedroom and my daughter's bedroom, but I wasn't comfortable. And I don't think I'll feel comfortable going forward with that level of in our space.
Yeah, intimacy.
Yeah, and
exposure.
Exactly.
Exposure is a good feeling for that.
If we're talking about a virus that stays in droplets for hours after somebody's been in that area. So it was essential for me to be able to clean where the children were coming in. And that's going to be something going forward. I need to be able to manage that and be able to have that separation between the daycare and my family and make sure that everybody's safe. And I think we need to set up something as well where we know who the families are going to be with, and that, contact, I think that they have that contact tracing that they're talking about that's going to be essential going forward. But I'm not sure if that's possible. You have families coming in, you're not going to question them every day. Where have you been? Who are you with? What were you doing? Maybe it'll work with fewer toys and equipment that we can manage easier. I'll be nervous about enrolling new families in the future. I think if we can, which kind of goes against how it's going to be, I think, because we may see those older siblings needing, school-age children needing care during the days that school might not be in, but parents still have to work. So there's a lot of things that are going to have to come into play.
It's interesting that you bring up this idea of being able to figure out what's going on the other side of the door, right? Like before families come to you.
Yes.
What has been going on, and it's a really interesting way to think about our culture and our level of expectation from other people. I think in the past, right? I can't ask you any real questions about your life on the other side of my door, right? I expect for you to live the kind of life that is going to be safe for you and your family, and in turn safe for mine. But this virus is like a next level thing. You know what I mean? And so I don't know if there's a way for people to find. I don't know if you find like-minded people who are all still basically sheltering in place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then can you pick and choose, right? And then what about the kids who are left, who by no fault of their own, their parents want to be social during a pandemic?
Right. They want to be out partying or in restaurants. And I think before, like you said, it was none of our business, as long as we knew that these families are, living a life that is safe for them and their children. But Yeah, I think there's going to be a whole level of needing to know that information going forward.
Now, when we think about what we talked a little bit about, perhaps older children might need care during this time. Have you thought a little bit about what childcare could look like if we expanded the idea of what childcare is? Right now, childcare is typically infants and toddlers, right?
Right.
And then you have school. Have you thought a little bit about how it might make it different, or how you might run your program differently if you were going to incorporate older kids? Have you thought about that?
That's a tough one. I think with me, it's more to do with the space that I have available. If I had more space, best case scenario, if I had more space, I would bring in an assistant, possibly to help with the younger children or to guide the older children in whatever they need to do. I think a lot of the time when you mix those two age groups, you see boredom in the older kids. And
so you have to really increase your offer. You basically have to change your whole program.
I think so. I think that for me, personally, I think that's the only way it could work, is to have, I mean, I know mixed age groups do work, but I think if it's for an entire day, you're going to see, either the older kids getting bored or the younger kids needing more attention, because your attention is now split with the older kids.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I've been thinking about, because my two children are about 4 and 6, right? I've been wondering if maybe I don't take care of infants anymore. Maybe I take care of kids who are 4 and 6, right?
Right.
I'm thinking about the fact that school is going to be open again. There are going to be a lot of families who are not comfortable, and they're not ready to send their kids back to school, which opens up a whole can of worms, right? Like, are schools going to allow families to opt out? And then if you do opt out, does that mean that you're homeschooling now? Or does that mean that schools are providing distance learning, even though they're still operating? Like, there's just a whole lot of things that are open. And I think, sometimes I'm thinking about where our business and our business offerings meets our own comfort levels, meets the needs of the community. And I think there could be a space where people are looking for like little micro schools, right?
Definitely.
Micro school is the best thing I can.
I like that term.
I can do to explain that, but then I'm also recognizing that I'm not a certified elementary school teacher, right? And so then what does that mean? What does that mean? You know what I mean? There's just still so many open questions. Do you think that there's a way that childcare providers, especially ones who are maybe thinking about moving from infants and toddlers to older kids, can get in partnership with schools?
Absolutely. I think that's something that we're going to have to consider, and schools might have to consider, when you see that parents are not sending their children to school because they don't have that level of safety. And how many parents can actually stay home and homeschool their children? That, there's a lot of people who still have to leave the house for work, and those children are now going to be on their own. So I think definitely we could come in and take over that area where it's needed, but then you're right, we would have to work with the schools to possibly have some level of training in the material that they're needing to learn online, distance learning. How do you manage the different abilities of those children that are coming into your program without the training? It's a whole nother level of care. I think, that what I saw with my own daughter, she could be left to her own devices quite a bit with the instruction that was coming from her school, but she still needed quite a bit of guidance in understanding that first. So, I think we would need training but I think it's possible. I think there's definitely going to be a need for it. And but would the parents have to then pay for that care when they are receiving state education? Would the schools pay us now as assistant teachers,
Right.
or after school programs, or because I'm thinking that probably after school programs won't be taking place for a
Right,
while.
operating. Exactly.
Or would the government pay us to come in and take over that area that's needed? But I think it would be attractive to families to have their children in, especially if they're within the bubbles of kids that they're already spending time with in school, and then moving on to a home daycare situation where they can stay with those, with a small group of friends that they've already been in contact with, rather than bringing children from different areas and different schools. Yeah, it's a lot to think about.
It is, and I think because it's so much to think about, that maybe the people who are in charge of this kind of thinking are like, it's so much work to go down that road of a what if, right?
Yeah.
What if this happens? How could we put these things in place? And there's so much work involved in that, and then it might not happen, right?
Right.
But I think on the other hand, even if it doesn't happen where schools close, I think definitely there are going to be families who want to opt out of school, and they're going to have to figure something out. And then on the other hand, this could open up a whole new opportunity for learning that we hadn't thought about before, right? There already a lack of there's overcrowding in schools. There's you know what I mean. There's already need for this kind of connection between another group of educators and students who need to be educated. And so it just keeps coming in my mind that in a time of crisis, right? There's so much innovation that's possible because we have to. But when we don't have to, we don't make the time to do that.
And I think that's a good point, because if these kids are in a smaller group in a home setting, it's a much more conducive setting to be learning and to have that more focused instruction from somebody in a more relaxed setting, in a home setting, and not having 40 children in your classroom who are all vying for one person's attention. So I think you're right. I think that could lead us to solving some of the problems we've had leading up to now. Of course, it causes its own problems, but I think that's a good point that you make. And I know that there's been a gap between, some children having the resources and computers at their disposal and internet, and then other children who are left to their own devices because both parents have to work, or they're a single parent family and one parent is working and out of the house all day, and now they're taking care of younger siblings as well as trying to keep up with schoolwork. So I think all of that gap needs to somehow get smaller.
Yeah, and I see this as such a bigger, this as you talk through those things, right? This is much bigger than just school. This is much bigger than just education or developmentally appropriate education. Like the impact of this pandemic and the impact of students being out of school and families being out of work, or families having, being essential workers, is a cultural, is a community, is a health and service, is a public service, is a human resources. Like, it covers so many different areas for our society.
Yeah,
it's such a bigger deal than just, oh, everybody's getting sick and so school is closed. Like,
right.
School, like literally school being closed is affecting everything.
Everything, exactly.
Everything and everyone around us.
Yep. And it's highlighting a lot of problems. Mm-hmm. So, now we're able to have these conversations.
Highlighting a lot of problems and highlighting a lot of gaps that we expected schools to fill, right? That we expected teachers to fill, that we expect childcare providers. You know, I've heard of a lot of childcare providers who were expected to take on the older sibling, and there's almost this tension of, well, if you can't take Cindy, who's older, then I'm going to have to pull the little one so that they can both go to XYZ place, right?
Right.
And providers get put into this like tight situation that doesn't feel good for anyone, right? It doesn't feel good for the family that has to pull out, but also doesn't feel good for the provider who's running a program in a certain kind of way.
Right.
Have you talked with any other providers to sort of hear about what they have been doing or what are planning to do in the next?
I haven't. I know that there's some providers out there who are taking the slack. When I had to close, my one family went to a provider that had, you know, a full program and an assistant, so they're able to manage that pretty well.
Do you think that there are ways that providers can partner specifically around this, but then in general, sort of moving forward? I feel like family home providers tend to operate very isolated, right? We're very insular.
Oh, absolutely.
And a lot of people have very, open doors to their families, but not to anybody else, right? You don't want to sort of share any kind of information. Do you think that there are ways that we can learn from this to be more partnering?
I think it would be great going forward to have, I know there are networks for childcare providers, family home daycare providers. But I think it would be great to have that community come together as providers and, possibly talk about where there are gaps and who needs help and who needs to, benefit from resources. Where are these resources? Or, families are looking for places and they can't find someone on their own. Then if you have this big community of providers, you can put out the word, oh, this person has space, this person has training, this person is taking older children and filling that need of where
That's
schools.
A really good point. That's a really good point. I like that point about training, like specific kinds of training.
Yeah.
Because it does matter. It does matter. We all want to be sort of open to families of any kind of need for children, but we also have to recognize our own strengths and weaknesses, and where I might not be able to manage one thing, there might be another provider who's more adept at handling.
Exactly.
That's really good. And then also for providers who are, maybe focusing on older kids or openings, or like I just feel like that is such a better way for us to operate than to be honest and totally transparent. And I feel like people hoard they just hold on so tight to their wait list, right? Like, and
I don't want to share. I don't want to share.
I don't want to share because
I'm not going to tell you who's looking for care.
Exactly, because I might need them in a couple months. You know what I mean? And that fear keeps us from sort of like turning the wheel that will help everybody move ahead, right? Because there are always people looking for care.
And I also think that community would help us as providers also, because I know how much stress is involved in daycare anyway. And during this time, I think the stress has increased substantially. And I think a lot of the time we forget to take care of ourselves or forget to look out for ourselves, and you feel that stress continually getting more and more. And I think with a community of people, it helps to talk about it and to offer, well, hey, I know someone who can come in and help you. Someone who has assistant, she can be an assistant for you for a little while. And
sharing assistants, man, oh man. People also hoard their assistant.
I know.
It's like, I don't want you to steal my assistant. So we cannot steal people. It is more helpful for you to share your assistant who you only use 3 days a week and help to have that, like, help get your assistant the other days filled. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I think there's some work that we can do to provide new innovative services, but there's also some work that we can do within our own industry, within our own family daycare community to be more encouraging and embracing of each other, understanding that when one of us does well, we all do well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's real. It doesn't have to be crabs in a barrel. And now, as we close, I'm thinking at the policy level, do you think that there are things that the state can put in place that would be a little bit more helpful for us? Our state operating body is called the Office of Early Childhood.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Office of Early Childhood.
Yeah.
Do you think they have been putting out a few things? Do you think there's anything they could do? Anything more?
I think it's great that they've relaxed the limits of the numbers for children. I think for older children, didn't they relax the limits in the last few months?
Yeah, they've allowed us now to take on the 3 older children during the summer without an assistant.
Right. Yeah.
It used to be that you could have
We needed an assistant.
You could have 3 extra older kids, but you had to have an assistant.
Right. So I think to give us the guidelines is they have been doing that, the health guidelines and how you should be greeting children in the morning, what they expect you to do in your program. I think that's been helpful. I think, I'm not really sure what would help specifically from the Office of Early Childhood. I think what they've been doing has been helpful so far. If they can continue.
They've given some funding, right? I think that they have paid for the childcare or they've created some kind of fund that essential workers can tap into.
That's right.
That pays for childcare, that pays the providers directly. I think they've also provided, additional cleaning supplies, especially during the time when shelves were empty, right?
Yes.
We could talk a little, another day about. I've heard some, stories about the kinds of materials, like they're hard, heavy-duty office, like industrial type cleaning things that we're not typically used to using around children, but it's a good start. It's a good start.
Yeah, and I think you're talking about funding. I think maybe some guidelines on how to receive funding because I'm sure that there's going to be another in the future, taken from what's been happening with this pandemic. It might happen again. We might have to shut down again. And knowing where to get that funding and how to get that funding and making it available immediately, I think is helpful because, as a daycare provider, if your families just suddenly leave, that's your salary it's gone. So I think information on whatever funding is available out there is helpful.
Yeah, and like a webinar or a YouTube video as a walkthrough on how to fill out these forms.
Yes,
please. Said they're simple, but they are not simple.
No, you can spend an entire day and then realize you entered something wrong and you can't go back in and correct it. So now you have to wait for them to send you a letter to say
to fix it. That's so true. One of the things I'm thinking about is it would be really great if our department, the Office of Early Childhood, starts talking more to the Department of Education, right? That it does take a little bit of work to put in these contingency plans, but it's worth it. It's worth it for them at that level to be talking about how our childcare providers or childcare centers can support schools in this new and innovative way and where the money would go. And of course, as soon as you start talking about the funding, people get scared and their eyes glaze over and it feels like losing. But it's not losing. It's not losing if you redirect some of the funds from your school to go with your children that are going somewhere else. It doesn't dip that deep into your fixed costs. You know what I mean? It should be worth it. And if it does, it should be worth it so that you're sure that you're keeping your kids in your school safe, that you're providing services for the kids who cannot be in the school, and that you're tightening the community, the education community that much better for the benefit of all of our students and families.
Yeah, I agree that that's a good starting place.
Right. No, but they didn't ask us, Josie. They didn't ask us. And so this is why we're having this conversation. So I can say, you didn't ask me, but here's some notes. We've been thinking.
We've been talking about it. So
we have been
here you
talking
go.
about it. So Josie, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I think that I have been thinking a lot about these little ideas, and they just bombard your brain, right? And so to be able to talk with another provider, someone else who's going through this, and in this case has done kind of the same thing that I have done. We're both closed now, trying to figure out what's next.
What's next? Yeah.
Yeah, I really, really appreciate this and your time. I really totally appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Absolutely. So come back again. If you come up with a bright idea about how you're going to open up, do come back and share it, because I am sure other people will want to hear more.
Okay. Thanks, Candice.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, okay?